This is Richard Varghese from Canna Corporate. I've been given the task of presenting the business case for the Odoo role policy, which I'm really excited that we did a presentation last year, and it's really come out very successful in our recent implementations. So we are back here to present the same thing again so that we get some more traction on the community and to present our business case to the world. So a quick slide on what Canna is. So maybe in the morning I've given us a quick presentation, so I'm going to run through the slide. Canna is in the business of producing nutrients and fertilizers for the growing industry. And one of our philosophies that supports our IT is the open source way. So we are heavy into Odoo and OCA. We are also very community oriented. So whatever we develop, we want to give it back to the community, and our entire IT landscape is on open source projects. Regarding the opportunity, what led us to developing this role policy module with Noviat is that the first one was that we had a lot of frequent role changes, and the business is always agile because we are spread across the world. Every country has its requirement in terms of roles, and we really needed to put in security and internal controls. We needed speed of change because when there is some role policy changes, we need really fast. It needs to be done like yesterday. And I'm sure everybody in IT knows what delivery is. It's always yesterday. So same thing goes here. The speed of change is very important. We also needed a very self-service environment, whereas we don't have to rely too much on the development team, rather than the functional consultants can take up role policy changes. We are spread across the world. That makes our job more complicated, the different types of roles across the world. We have temporary roles, we have permanent roles. So all these things add to the complexity. Cross-functional roles, somebody who's a business unit manager, also doing an account management role. So how do we manage all that? And then our existing challenges. So what is our existing challenges is that the standard framework of Odoo for roles, when we started analyzing, is less intricate, which means we're not able to dig into the to a small button hiding, or a small menu item hiding, or a small field hiding. With this particular thing, we're able to do all that. Of course, lead time for change was very high. So it took a major hit in 2019 and 2020. Because 40% of our change requests were role related, right? And then because of that, we could only prioritize on the high request changes for role policy. And because of that, the pipelines, the bandwidth became smaller and smaller because we could not execute all those change requests. Regression testing, because when you do a change in the code, it's always tough because we have to aggressively test all those features, and that became tougher and tougher. And that led to rollbacks had to be planned very well, because something goes wrong, it had to be changed, things like that. So the effort for changing the roles became really. And the most important thing is when we came to auditing, we didn't know who had what. There was no one point of truth, because that was the biggest challenge that we had, because we had to satisfy our auditors that somebody in this company could not see the purchase price list. And now with this particular role policy in place, it's just a matter of pulling it out like a report. So let's see what we achieved in 2021. In 2021, we went in for a mega implementation of Odoo 13 migrations across multiple instances across the world. And we successfully delivered it with the role policy module. So put it that way. We reduced significantly our lead time, especially in implementing policies across the company. Testing validation rollback was a lot more faster and quicker. It supports all Odoo modules and menus, and that's what Luke and else did for us, with the support of the project team. 20 plus roles are supported across the country in various entities across the world. It's intricate, it's flexible, and it handles most complexities. So that's the way. So bottom line, reducing development effort. And what did we do in the role policy module? I'm just throwing out some metrics that we had in terms of this thing. Handling changes reduced from 2 days to 5 minutes. So any change in role policy now, I'm talking about complex changes. So that changes from 2 days where it needed development effort, it needed a pull request, it needed merge, it needed testing, All that has changed to 5 minutes work. So we are very agile when it comes to role policy now. For example, a sales inbound employee, we have the configuration schema is that we have around 203 ACLs, 29 menu items, 10 window actions. It's there. And when it comes to a business unit manager, it's the reverse. We have 99 ACLs and 139 menu items. And all these things are just configuration from a role policy perspective. So it becomes a lot more easier. And this multiplied by 20 roles or 25 roles or 30 roles, our job gets just easier and easier. So that's how easy things are. Administration employees, again, it's just an example for finance. They have 96 ACLs and 160 menu items to see. So to hide another menu item is just a click of a button, which else is going to press it in the next wave. So we were able to launch this 1-year project of Odoo 13 migration. And because of that, we are there. So for a small talk about the credits, of course, Canna is the sponsors, along with lead architects of Noviat, supported by Els and Luke here. And then you can follow our projects on github.com, Canna ICT. That's where most of our projects will be landing, especially the role policy. It's going to be there. And as far as I know, it's already been taken up by the OCA. And over to you, Els. If any questions, Els is going to take over from here. Thank you.
Okay, I will be presenting a video that I recorded because I don't want to forget the most important stuff. So I will play the video, and of course, Luke afterwards will explain some technical issues, and we will be available on Discord for any questions. Hello, and welcome to the demo of the Role Policy app. By default, when you install a new module in Odoo, a user has access to that module. The Role Policy app is a game changer in the sense that as long as no specific access rights for a module have been granted to a certain role, users in that role will not have access to the module. To show you an example, you see a number of roles that will be used in our database. Most of them are empty for now. I will show you the sales inbound employee, and as you see here, he has no access rights at all. I will show you what the sales inbound employee can see. I log in to my database, and even when I search for menus, the SIE is not able to see anything. The Role Policy app allows you to define roles through the user interface or by importing a spreadsheet. The Role Policy app, and that is new compared to last year, also allows you to add security on clients' actions, such as reconcile. I will show you an example here in the system. So you can add the reconcile option to, for instance, the administration employee. And this is not allowed by standard Odoo. To start configuring a role, it may be best to just add all the things you need from the user interface. For example, add a line on menu item level. Here, you can select detailed menus. You don't have to apply all menus to a role, but you can just select, for instance, a sales menu with some sub-menus and no purchase menu. If you add menus here, I'll show you an example. I'll add sales menu. Of course, you need to add the top level and then the base level menus. I will show you an example just with a few menus. You can add them to save. And now you can easily export your results. Export can be used to define your role afterwards. For the demo, I already created a spreadsheet for the sales inbound employee. So I'm going to remove these. On ACL level, you simply add the model and you define read, write, create, delete access. You can activate a rule. You can delete it on entry, or you can delete an entry on import. And when configuring your spreadsheet, you don't have to apply the name. For instance, here you see an example for the DM, but it's the same for the SIE. Of course, in my example, I have defined these names, but you don't have to do that, because if you just import it and export it again, the names will be applied by the system. On menu item level, when you do it manually, you don't need anything. You don't need to know anything about the external identifier that you find in IR menu. But if you use the spreadsheet, you will have to define the external identifier to import the menu. You can import individual sheets. You select your file, SIE, and you can select the tab that you want to import. But here, since I did not import anything for this role, I will import the entire spreadsheet. While importing, the system will do some tests. Suppose that you have added a rule for an MRP module, which is not installed on your system, then the system will tell you and throw you an error message. It will, of course, import all other tab pages without errors. In this way, you can just change the spreadsheet for the tab concerned, and then you can import that sheet only. Let me explain you something more about view modifier rules and what the power of these rules can be. I return to my database. I refresh because I've been importing the SIE role. And now you see that some menus appear. Okay. I will create a new customer. And as you see, the street field is a mandatory field. I'll enter some data. And you see that I have some mandatory fields, just like the email and the contract type, which is, of course, a specific field. I add a fiscal position with no VAT required. Should I change it to VAT required, you will see that the tax ID becomes mandatory too. I will save. And then I see that I need to add a customer price list. So for all mandatory fields, the system will throw a message. Okay, I add the price, I save again, and I confirm my partner. I now return to the customer and contacts menu. I see my partner here. I open it. I click edit. And now I see that the address block is read-only. Let me show you how I did that with the role policy. I return to my SIE role and I go to the View Modifier Rules. On contact level, you see that I have added the field name is street. On a required level, I put a 1, which means that the field is always required for the SIE. And here I put that the state should be different from draft or different from draft and delivery contract is true. So only in case when the state is draft, the SIE will be able to change the street. So that is how it is set up. Let's switch to the data manager. I've also applied a number of inactive rules just to show you in an easy way how these things work. You see, I have 3 inactive rules. As a data manager, I will change my profile. I have several roles in my profile. So here I can say which role is the enabled role, and thus the role in which I'm working with. I change to the data maintenance officer. The system refreshes, and you see that I have a lot more menus. I go to sales, products, and I see that on a product level, I have reordering rules. But I don't want my data manager to see reordering rules. So how can I find what I have to define here in the X part? Well, we go to the views. I select a model. I know it's a form view. And in the view architecture, I know there will be something like reordering. I see two views. So I end up in the procurement template, and I see that when I search for reordering, I see that it happens twice. So you see that the reordering rules have two different buttons. I want them to be hidden on both levels. So I need to add an XPath expression to hide button name action view order points the first occurrence and then the second occurrence. So I will activate these rules. I will return to my data manager. I refresh. I open my product again, and the reordering button is gone. You might have noticed that on a Canna level, I have the price label and no prices because I've been hiding the price. Of course, that's a bit ridiculous, so I don't want the price label to be there. So how can I do that? I'll go to my other browser. I see that I've already created an inactive rule. I know that it's on the product template Kanban view. The view type is automatically set. And I know that the expression which displays the price label is ULLY. So what do? I say I want this label to be invisible. I click active. I save. I return to my Kanban. I refresh. Label is gone. You might have noticed that we also have tabs for view type attributes and view model operations. Now, what is the difference between the two? View model operations are defined on a model basis, so for a complete object, or for all objects by using default. With view type attributes, you can hide attributes on the main view level, allowing you to change or override attributes of the main view. I will show you what it looks like in my database. On a product level, I see the import button. I also see it on the tree view. I go back to my view model operations. I click edit. And I want to add a default for which I hide the import option. So I select the model default, which will apply to all models. I click the operation import and disable is activated by default. I go back, I refresh the screen, and you will see that the import button is gone, both in this view and on Canna view. Of course, I can also make exceptions. Here, I have hidden the archive option on the default level, meaning that my data maintenance officer will not be able to archive records. But of course, I want my data maintenance officer, who is responsible for creating and maintaining products, to be able to archive products. So I add an exception on the model product template saying that archive is allowed. I already prepared this, so I will just activate the rule. I go back to my screen. I refresh. And here I have the archive option. For the DM, I did not add any ACLs on lead tags, for instance. But of course, my data maintenance officer needs to be able to create lead tags. I go to CRM configuration, tags, and I see that my DM does not have any create, read, write, update. So I go back to my role. I add an ACL on lead tag. I give create, read, write, and delete rights. I save. I return to my screen. I refresh. And now I am able to create lead tags. This is yet another powerful option of our role policy app. Just let me tell you something about the power of model methods. As AE, I cannot post. I will add a develop method for posting, and only then I will be able to post. This is, and then it stopped. So this is what I wanted to demonstrate in a quarter of an hour. I give the forum to... and welcome to the demo. No, I'm going to stop this one. I'm going to give the forum to Luc right now, and he will explain something more about the technicalities behind the role policy.
Yeah. Hello, welcome to all of you. You see basically exactly the same slides as a year ago. So the good news is that when we developed it and when we went live, we really didn't have to change anything. So we got it nearly right from the beginning. So the only thing we have done between last year and now is a few bug fixes and basically 2 small new features, and that's really it. So looking to how it works from an architectural standard is basically when we install the module, we remove from the users all the standard groups. So if as a user, you would before be a sales manager or a warehouse manager or whatever, an accounting advisor, your group is gone. We will also, from the backend, whenever you open a screen, we remove all the groups dynamically from the views when we load them. So whenever there's a community module or an Odoo standard module which has groups equal something in the view, that one is removed because we need to replace it all by the role policy. So that's really the 2 main things we do with the standard groups. And then basically we will create roles, and a role is basically again a group. So it's a group, but it just has a small flag, a small boolean which says that it's a group of type role. So the net result is that really we can do this whole thing without doing any change in the Odoo kernel. So we just do need to trap a few methods, take them in inherit for the view rendering. And at the install time, we have to remove the standard group from the user, but for the rest, we do standard things. And so then basically, if we look to the role ECLs, what we do actually, if you put an ECL, we will just dynamically create a group. And that group actually corresponds to the ACL, and that one is being shared between all the roles having the same ACL for that object. So we are not going to multiply the number of ACLs. We actually need less ACLs than you really need with doing the same thing with standard to do. We're putting those roles on the menu items. We also put those roles on the action bindings, and action bindings, we actually go a bit further than Odoo standard in the sense that in Odoo standard, you can put an action binding with a group on report actions, server actions, window actions, but we also have added here the support for the client actions, and we needed it in this project for the reconcile from the journal items entry, because that's a client action, and not everyone here is allowed to reconcile accounting entries. So that's a change we made, but we don't touch the kernel. From a conceptual standpoint, we're working with flat roles, because what we do see, if you use the concept of Odoo standard, where you have the financial advisor, which have some children, and if you change the child role, then all of a sudden the upper role gets also these rights, and that actually gives unwanted effects on the security. So you can't really control it. In this case, roles are flat, so basically no children. Whenever we change a single role, only that role is affected, and we have no side effects from a security standpoint to the other roles. By the fact that we can easily import-export it, if you make one role in, for instance, the sales area, making a second role, it's really a matter of a few minutes, because you just export that role, you make your few changes. So like, for instance, you give a few more ACLs if you need to give more rights, or you remove a few ECLs, you can remove a couple of menu items, add them, and then it's done. So basically, we don't need this concept of side roles, because we have this powerful export-import for creating one role from another one. Installing new apps, there is also a difference between standard Odoo. If within standard Odoo you install a new app, then all of a sudden you have the user template, and new users start becoming by default in Odoo of most of the apps, they become immediately the manager of that app. Also here, the concept is different. When we install a new app, the existing users don't have any access to it. So they even don't see that new app is installed, because actually you really need for that new app to add to the role policy for the users requiring it. For the roles requiring it, you have to add the menu items, the ACLs, and where needed, few modifier rules. So if in that new role you say, well, these and these fields needs to be hidden, and those fields should not be hidden, then you need to actually do the magic of the view modifier rules that Els demonstrated. Another thing which I think is powerful, although we don't need it and we don't use it in Canna, so it's like a feature which we programmed but we haven't tested, is the company-based roles. So if you're in a multi-company environment, one person can be the sales manager in company A and can be a business unit manager in company B. So that again actually is something we treat, so that one person is wearing a different hat in different companies. Then actually the most complex part in the programming of this thing is the web modifier rules, but that's also where we actually gained the most of flexibility in the Canna environment, because we can just dynamically change the views and say, well, actually this role, he should not allow to see this thing or not allowed to push this button and so on. So we can just dynamically put the rule and say, well, based on certain conditions, based on the role, you can see this button, or you cannot see this button, or you can see this field, or you cannot see this field. We do have a capability to make the definition of the role easier, but it's a bit dangerous in the sense that you can just say, well, I'm going to hide, for instance, a certain field for a certain role on all views on a certain model. So this is a bit dangerous. First of all, it's less performant, because we then need to scan through all the rules, the views before uploading it, and hide the attributes. I think it's going to be configuring fast, but it's, I think, not the optimal solution. But for certain objects, it goes fast. And then we also have the option to really remove elements, and the removal of elements can be powerful, because then you don't need to put the ACL. So security is stronger if you actually say, well, for instance, this many-to-one for this role, we don't want him to see it, so we are not going to hide it, because if it's hidden, it's still rendered in the view, and it's just hidden from the user interface, but it's sent over the wire. If we remove it, then actually we trap it before we render the view, so at the server end, before we send it over the network. So the user actually does not need an ACL to see this many-to-one field. The risk we do have with removing it is that if you have you install, for instance, a community module, which actually wants to inherit from that field that we removed, it may break. So that means that you might have to remove it also on the inheriting view. So it's a bit tricky from a technical standpoint. So that's what I say, it is higher security, but you may break the dialogue. So it needs a bit of a technical knowledge from the functional expert maintaining the role policy. So we do see that else from time to time actually turns to the development team in order to actually configure some complex web modifier rules. View type attribute rules. Well, here you see it basically, you have a couple of attributes where you can put on a form level, and then for a specific view, you can just actually define what the user is allowed to do on that specific form view. So create, edit, delete, duplicate, import, archive. Export XLSX, but basically it goes further. So whatever attribute you have on a form or a tree view, so on the main tag of a view, can be defined what we do with it. View model operations is a bit the same. And basically, yeah, technically it shares the same JavaScript code, but it goes further. So it doesn't do it just on a view level, but it does on all the operations on a certain object. So you disable, for instance, the export function for all views on a certain object. And then we have defaults, and you can override them on a per model, or you can override them for specific views. And then, yeah, what we then see is the priority. So the view type attribute is getting priority over the default per rule, and is getting priority over the overall default. Model method rules, that's a bit of a difficult one, in the sense that for certain methods, Odoo has hard-coded groups into the Python code, which we believe is not a clean way from Odoo to do it, but that's the reality. So if you then want to say, for instance, that you have to be able to post an accounting entry, but you're not in the standard Odoo groups, and you can't be because we removed them, then we have to do some programming. So what we have done is, for instance, a small module called role policy account, and that one actually adds the account move post method to this rule set. And then you can say, well, actually, this role is allowed to post this method. So like this, if you look into the role policy repo from the OCA, you'll see a couple of small modules where actually we need to do some Python programming on top of certain applications, because Odoo is handling the security for certain things in Python code and not in a configuration option. And then by this, we disable it, we replace it, and we make it configurable again. But the modules which are available are really only driven by the project sponsored by Canna. So, well, this can become more widely available if within the OCA community, this module is being used on a wider scale, and then we might see more modules and more capabilities being developed by the community. We have the concept, as also showed it in the demo, of multiple roles. As actually, this is about the only slide which I've added compared to last fields, the support of what we call the role policy selector. So if a user has multiple roles, and we do know that the user has like 2 heads on a permanent level, we can basically try to configure it with the priority fields. So in case you're allowed in one role to see a button, and you're not allowed in another role to see that same button, and you have the 2 roles, then it's difficult for us to know which actually is the winning case in your combination of roles. So then you can say, well, actually, on this rule, I put a higher priority of a lower one. Then if you have those 2 rules, then actually the highest priority one wins. But that's very difficult if you're having multiple roles to really manage it. So in case you have multiple roles and you really want to make sure you can do your job as a business unit manager, for instance, because you need to do approvals, and then actually in the afternoon you need to take over the role of the account manager because actually there is an urgent quote that needs to go out. Then you can actually just go to the role policy selector, say, well, actually, I select now as my active role only the business unit manager, and then in the afternoon you go to the selector and you just select your role as the account manager. And then actually we don't have any conflict between rules because we have one role active at the same time, or a couple of them. Then by now actually having this rolled out and running it in production, we actually see like a growing roadmap. So these are like feedbacks we see from the users or from the experiences. One of the things we do see is that you need to really be familiar with this tool to actually don't make any syntax error in the rules. We don't really want to put constraints onto it, because then loading a role which now takes a couple of minutes would actually maybe take like half an hour. So what we intend to do is basically develop a rule syntax checker, which you can then actually run offline when you see that, or you want to do a sanity check of your rule base. One of the other things which I think we really have.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, time is up.
Okay,
I'm
well
sorry.
then we'll stop, because this was my last slide. So if there are questions, then
I think the questions will have to be moved to the Discord room, because we have a talk starting at 5:10
okay.
right now.
Okay.
So I'm really sorry, but it was really super interesting. I have lots of questions I would like to ask you.
Yeah.
But we will have to take this offline, I think.
No problem.
Okay, no problem. We will be available on Discord.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.